I just thought it would be useful. So we try to just catch up with various different campaigners in the autism sector, because we can't run all campaigns ourselves. There's lots and lots of stuff to do, and obviously we've got slightly different positions at the moment. And I think we want to understand a bit better what your position is and sort of the reasons for that. And I guess what we wanted to start by saying though is just acknowledge. I think it's really important we acknowledge on both sides that we all want the same goal. So all of us want to stop any children being given any harmful substances to cure autism, because there is no cure for autism. And I hope it's clear from sort of what we've said, publicly, that we don't think there is a cure for autism. Autism is part of who people are. It's people are, and that's partly why we've changed our language. We don't say people with autism anymore. We say autistic people. And so I guess we just wanted to be clear that that's where we're coming from. And to us, the difference is more about how do we make sure that happens, rather than disagreeing about whether we want that to happen, basically.
Well, I want that to happen. I've been campaigning 4 years solely in the UK by myself, with no support from you. And you're the biggest autistic charity.
Well, I think I guess that's the thing, is that we see that differently. We think that what we're trying to do is achieve that same aim by different means. So, for example,
you think that educating the parents will help, but these parents don't want to come to you. They believe that autism is a disease and an injury, and they don't want to support their children. They want to purge autism. They want to eradicate it. So they're not going to come to you, which is why I am having to go into Facebook groups and risk my safety and my family's safety. And that's not right.
I think the difference is obviously you're working on a national level, and Emma's on the ground, on the front line of this, and on her own pretty much as well on the front line of this. And the things that Emma sees day to day are horrific, and I don't think necessarily that's reflected upwards. And I understand, me personally, that you think the right line is to educate parents from a distance, encourage them to come
I've done my best to do that myself too. I've written two books.
It's not just education. I think we also think there's maybe more of a role for enforcement, and what we want to. But I think the place I think there's a difference at the moment, and we talked to Fiona last week about this as well, is trying to understand Is the issue enforcement, and I don't know what goes with that, maybe a lack of evidence, all those kind of issues?
No, there's no lack of evidence of more.
Okay. But how do we get, obviously, if people are peddling these kind of substances, we want them to be prosecuted, because it's wrong for anybody to profit, and to push people to do this. That's a horrific thing to happen.
So next time the media come to you, will you please say, yes, there is a problem? Because the amount of times the media has come to the NAS and they've gone, we don't see any evidence of it. I'm showing you evidence constantly. For 4 years, I've had the police in my house multiple times.
So what is it that's stopping? I guess that's what we want to understand.
It's exactly what Fiona was saying. And Fiona's in court today against
Yes, she did. Yeah. But so what Fiona had said to us was that she thought...
It's the blind area between having to report it to the Food Standards Agency when it's not food.
Right.
It should be reported to the
MHRA.
And they're throwing it in between.
Yeah, there is legislation, obviously, but there's nothing there.
Sure,
and
it's legislation, but it's got this cop-out clause for the parents where they can, they're so desperate, these poor parents are so put upon. No, they're child abusers. They're abusing their children, and they need to be prosecuted for it.
So I guess coming back to that gap between the FSA and the MHRA, so what they can do, because obviously the MHRA shut down some of the GC maths stuff historically.
Yeah, they've done great.
So they obviously saw that was something they could do.
Yeah.
So it's why aren't the MHRA acting on anybody selling MMS? Yeah. And is there something more? So what was interesting about what Fiona was saying was that she was saying that the HPRA obviously are doing that in Ireland.
They're doing that, yeah, but not here.
So why can't the MHRA do that here? And I think there's certainly something that
we need to put pressure on them. To do that.
So we are absolutely happy to write to them and to talk to them about it, and try and understand more about why they're not, because from what Fiona said, it sounds like the MHRA have as many, if not more, powers than the HPRA do. So therefore, to us, it might be about them just being a bit more pushy and actually using their powers. Yeah. Rather than necessarily having new laws to give them new powers.
I think the new laws are needed, sorry to cut you off, because it's not only MMS, it's every other thing that they're coming out with, turpentine, kerosene, borax. There's so many we're seeing now, iodine, all being shoved up autistic children. For what? You cannot cure autism. They're torturing these children, and they're getting away with it. And I believe that the only way forward is a legislation that makes it illegal to say you can cure autism, because it's not a curable condition.
No, we agree with that. So why wouldn't that come under child protection legislation?
Because these parents are getting let off of the "they're so desperate" thing. It's like there's a lapse between children and autistic children. Do you see what I mean?
Where is it in the legislation that it says that these parents are desperate, so therefore it's not a child protection case?
I hear it all the time from the social services and the police.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is that an attitudinal thing?
It's very much an attitude thing.
There's, you've probably seen from my Twitter feed, I talk about the negative narrative a lot. Mm-hmm. And there is a huge negative narrative about autism. It's all suffering and, the terms that we use, severe, and, and it's very that medical model as well. And it's, that attitude is permeated in British culture.
And with autism.
Absolutely permeated with it. And I think in order for that to change, it's not going to be something socially, it's not going to be something that changes overnight. And it's going to take decades and decades and decades of work and work and work. And that's where we come from as activists. Yeah. That's what we want. That's our end goal. That's the acceptance thing that we talk about all the time. But in the meantime, there's nothing there that stops that narrative from being used and followed. And I think it's so important now that there are laws that are brought in, because there's the narrative is in the heads of everybody. It's in the heads of the police, it's in the heads of the NHS, it's in the heads of the law, it's everywhere, and so it softens the blow of whatever these parents do. I've been asked by the police,
are you a doctor? No, I'm not a doctor. So what right have you got to tell these parents that they can't use this on their children? I'm saying it's bleach. It's bleach. Yeah, but they're trying to help their children. It's bleach.
I mean, that's quite clear that you're trying to give your child chemicals that clearly...
That's the thing, they're labelled as desperate. But why are they desperate? They don't need to be desperate. You have a child who is autistic. If their child is labelled severely autistic or low-functioning autistic, it's because of their comorbidities. It's not because of their autism.
Agreed.
Their autism isn't an issue. The autism needs to be accepted. The parents need to be educated like you want them to be in order that they accept their children, understand that they're different, treat them accordingly, so that schools treat them accordingly, so that then that problem doesn't exist.
Sure.
And then but the issue is that getting that message across to the parents isn't happening. They go into CAMS, they fight for 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get their children diagnosed. Yeah. Constantly parents talk about this fight and this struggle, but what they don't realise is that they're fighting against society. They're not fighting against autism.
No, they're not fighting their child. They're fighting for the support.
Autism gets the blame for it.
We see autism won today, or we're fighting autism today, or my child overcame autism. It's all that sort of speech.
Which is why we get the message of desperate parents. Parents that don't understand their child's condition, they don't understand their child is different, and it's fine for them to be different because they get bombarded with this message of negativity. And then obviously you've got the anti-vax campaigners feeding into this, which is a huge problem still in this country. It's massive.
Yeah, it is.
And that feeds into the cures and it's constantly.
You've seen the piece I did on collation, haven't you, where I contacted the clinic.
Well, just going back to the police stuff, what about safeguarding? When you have these cases, do you talk to the local authority safeguarding teams?
I speak to social services and the police. Okay. In 2 cases, 2 children have been removed now from their homes. Okay. Obviously, I can't say their names, but one was the Cheshire case, and the son, the boy who I reported, he was 12, and he was stuffing tissue up his nose and down his throat to stop the mother giving it to him. He was severely epileptic, and she'd taken him off all medication to give him chlorine dioxide CD, MMS. So in that case, they did swoop and take him out. Yeah. They weren't happy with me. I've had death threats and rape threats because of that case.
It's awful.
It is. It's sad, isn't it? I've had stuff sent to my house. I've had phone calls, emails. I've had to call the police because I've got a stalker. The other little girl who was taken was 5, and she was in Edgware, and the police actually pressed charges of sexual abuse because of the forced penetration with an enema, which I thought was great. I thought that was the right thing to do because these children are being held down, and the parents are bragging about it. It took 5 of us today, go Team Rio. It's so distressing to read, and so can you imagine what the children are going through? As an autistic person, that hurts to know that every day I'm waking up and there's children and vulnerable adults going through that.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is there something we can learn from the cases where there have been prosecutions or have been actions in terms of children being removed? Is it about looking at those cases, understanding what worked in terms of actually there being action, and therefore trying to spread that kind of practice to more?
We had police go into a woman's house in Dover and seize MMS from her house and still didn't prosecute.
And what's
the safeguarding response around that?
See, they don't tell me unless I'm called to court, and I haven't been called to court yet.
So
the 2 cases where they've removed the children, I provided enough evidence in every case. My God, the amount of stuff I gave them, screenshots. I was talking to the parents on the different profiles, pretending that I was using it, having them say to me, this is what I'm doing, this is how much we're using. Do you see now why I'm so desperate to get this done?
We could, as we said at the beginning, we share your goal. It's just about how do we do that? Because actually, part of the issue is if you go for new legislation, you're talking 5 years probably to get that done. The other thing is it has to be something where you can make enough of a legislative case. So if you think about what's going on in government at the moment, Brexit, the economy, there's all kinds of issues. Trying to get just that slot of parliamentary time is really, really difficult. You're competing against all of these other issues.
So it has to be right, is what you're saying.
It has to be right, but also you have to have a level of... I can see what you might have evidence in the individual cases. You have to have evidence about the scale of the problem, because why is this more important than, I don't know, maybe some of the, any kind of other terrible social issues.
Is too many.
Yes, I agree with that, Emma. What I'm trying to say is, in a political context, what politicians are trying to say, so for example, one of the ways that you can get legislation is a private member's bill, right? So MPs have a ballot. Some of them will then get some time to put their own, whatever they think is the most important issue on the table. They will have so many people coming to them with so many different issues, and they then have to say, right, why is this more important than, I don't know, air pollution in London? Why, how many people are going to die from air pollution in London this year compared to, that's what's difficult. It's the standard of evidence you need to make that case is so high.
Very Sherman said I've provided more than enough.
So what I'm trying to say is, if there's a way to do it without getting to that level of evidence, we might be able to get quicker action. So if there's cases where within the current legal framework you are getting the action that is needed, and we want that, right? If people are abusing their children, they should face sanctions for that. Absolutely, they should. Of course, they should. But it's just, what's the quickest, most effective way to get to that point? Is what we're trying to understand.
Can I just jump in a little bit? This is not my meeting. Emma asked me to come along and see if I could add anything to it. And I clearly know a little bit about what's going on in the Commission, as much as anybody else. And this has gone on for a long time, and clearly people are not happy. I got involved with this a couple of years ago when I was asked to comment on somebody who was being shouted at for therapy. So it's nothing to do with chemicals or medicine.
Yeah, I think I remember there was a TV.
Absolutely.
I was in that. It was me who contacted the BBC about it.
So it was, it's not just about that. Sure. So what I did before I came, and I've shared this with the guys this morning. And are you happy for me to share this?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely fine. Because I thought it might give a context for a discussion that might take us to a slightly different place. Really starting off with first principles, and what we're looking for is for all children to have equal protection under the law against physical harm, social harm, psychological harm, and financial harm. And do we all agree with that?
Of course, yeah.
So I think that's really where I'm coming from. And certainly the discussions that I've had with Barry Shearman, and I don't think there's going to be too much problem there. So I think that it's really understanding what these things constitute. We come back to that. I think that the other first principle for me is the tolerance and acceptance of difference. And you've talked about autism being a difference. We ought to be advocating for tolerance of people who are different. In society. That's the role of the NAS, and this is what the NAS does. But it's very, very difficult for people to report concerns. And I think it should be, as part of the first principle, if you're worried about something, you should be able to get it acted on quickly, without putting yourself at risk. It should be easy. And once you've done that, there should be a prompt and proper investigation of that concern, without any prejudice to the outcome. The right authorities. So if we agree that those are the first principles, I think we can resolve a lot of the other stuff.
I'm wondering if we could add to that something about autism being a lifelong condition, though, that it's not something, because I think
that you're, I don't know. I mean, but whether it is or whether it isn't, it sort of opens the door, because it might be in some cases and might not be in others. So there'll be people who will argue that.
It's always going to be a lifelong condition.
But there will be people who will argue with that position.
They'd be wrong.
I'm telling you that there's been a study in Sweden which shows that by age 30, a number of the people who are diagnosed as in children no longer meet criteria. So,
I believe that people learn to cope. Yeah.
So I just think of the first principles, we're doing something about. We're talking about children.
That would come under the tolerance and the acceptance of difference anyway.
We've also got to include vulnerable adults in this. So I've seen vulnerable adults.
Sure. But it's the equal protection under the law. So the areas of concern, I think, that have been flagged up by Emma and by various people are these whole things about experimental treatments, whatever they are, whether it's shouting therapy or giving chemicals to people or whatever, highly experimental, which are also harmful. And then there's the harmful narrative around, this dreadful disease called autism, which harms individuals psychologically and
it's just
physically.
plain misinformation.
Yeah, and people then become exploited. So parents get exploited.
Yeah.
They pay huge amounts of money for these things. It preys on ignorance of what autism is, both within the autism and professional communities.
It preys on fear as well.
So what do you do about it? Well, regulation does exist to some degree. Is it adequate? I think it probably isn't. We might need to revisit that. Inspection, nobody ever really takes any kind of inspectorial role of these things, even though...
What would you be inspecting?
If you set yourself up as a clinic, for example, offering treatment, you should be subject to inspection under health professionals authority, under CQC, etc.
I'm not 100% sure because it's not an area that I know that well. Fairly sure that if you set up something as complementary or alternative medicine, there is some kind of...
There is, but it's voluntary at the moment. That it's voluntary.
The individual registration is. But I think if you were a clinic, wouldn't that...
I think it's a grey area. It's a grey area. And it's one that we had this issue with this woman, what's her name, Bramati, offering cranial osteopathy as one of the autism treatments. She wanted to be registered with the HPA and they wouldn't have it.
Yeah, good.
So she was wanting to be registered.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story. Reporting concerns and safeguarding and crime, I think there are pretty strong existing laws there which would enable you to do that. Whether they're acted on or not is another matter. Use of existing frameworks, we've talked about CQC medicines agencies. The information standard is one which has a significant role to play in that the NHS and the website that Bernard Fleming runs down here is accredited by the information standard.
I used to work somewhere that had that.
So, there is a mechanism there for saying this intervention is okay, this one isn't.
Yeah.
So, we don't make enough of that, I suspect. Registration of health professionals who are delivering these kind of things, and then whether it went on, and this is something that probably is within the gift of the Commission, to set up something like a code of practice for practitioners or whatever, and a register so that you can't do any of this unless you're on the register, and the work of the Commission. So I've just set out a few ideas really to structure our thinking, and we I think made a bit of progress in that we agree with the first principles. There's no division there. And it's how we get to some of these other points, really, where I think we can probably constructively develop an approach, whilst recognising, and I do agree, and having tried to get through some of this stuff with the Autism Act, it takes a long time. For legislation, but you can.
There's something added to it, though.
There are short ways of doing this through. Say that you can get statutory instruments through fairly quickly if they attach to some primary legislation, through guidance through the Autism Act itself, or NICE can issue these things from time to time. So that there can be bits that can be done. I shall shut up now. I wanted to put that out there.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I think it is just the difference between enforcement of existing kind of policy and legislation, development of new sort of policy rather than legislation, because these things take longer, or legislation itself. And I guess what we don't have a sense of is what exactly, if there were legislation, that would say, like, what is the gap that would be in the legislation?
It would say that anybody touting a cure, anything that anybody selling or promoting or using something that they have touted as a cure.
The model that we looked at was the Legal Hires Act, in which manufacture, promotion, sales, any of those areas would cover any of the, I mean, obviously we're talking about the chemical treatments and things here rather than the non-chemical treatments and the interventions. But in terms of that would cover.
But I'd want homeopathy included as well, because people are taking their children off medications for ADHD, and there's other things as well. It's not only autism.
It's a wider issue. It's obviously the comorbidities of autism as well. If the end user, to put it bluntly, the parents, the people that are using these products are covered by existing legislation, the people that produce the stuff, the people that sell the stuff, the people that promote the stuff aren't covered by the legislation. Yeah. I mean, I could go into Amazon on my phone right now and buy MMS.
I guess the challenge with that is you're probably buying it from, well, you could be buying it from America, or you could be buying it from...
No, there's UK.
No, I'm sure there are.
I'm sure they
I mean, obviously with anything, I could go on the internet and buy heroin tomorrow, probably, if I wanted to, you know. But
I mean, that's
but driving it underground makes it harder to access, and I think that's the problem. If the parents cannot access this stuff, or they have limited access to this stuff, then it makes it harder for them to use it. And then in the meantime, if we're butting them with the education, the positive messages rather than the negative narrative, that's when it all starts swinging back round into our favour again. I think that's the way.
I have turned parents around that have been using, managed to turn them around and stop them.
And what's made a difference there?
All parents, at the end of the day, believe that they are helping their child, and if the message they're getting is that for their child to fit into their society. So a lot of these parents are religious, so they can't in their society take their children into churches because they've been told, their child is a demon, this, they're that, the fathers are ashamed, sort this out. And the mothers are thinking, but saying that, I've reported a lot of fathers for using it as well.
You're really into the safeguarding agenda, where you're probably clustering a number of harms, which could be physical, social, psychological. And I don't think you need to be too definitive. To respond to your question, the research, such as it exists, would suggest that early parent programs, not intervention for children, but parent programs, are the ones that make the most difference.
And I think that makes sense
in terms of keeping people away from this lunacy and into things which are going to be more helpful.
Which reinforces what Emma does and what I do to an extent as well. I don't talk to the parents that Emma talks to, but I do talk to the everyday parents. I get messages all the time asking for help. What should I do? I've been told my child needs ABA. Do I put it on it? But it's when I start explaining and taking the time, but obviously I'm one person, and I can't do that for everyone. And in terms of advocates, there's probably in Britain there's probably another 1,000 of me, another 1,000 of Emma that take the time to talk to these people. But while I'm not earning any money while I'm doing it, I'm not getting paid while I'm doing it. I'm an autistic person. I need support, but here I am supporting everybody else and harming myself supporting everybody else. But I do it, mentally, physically. It wears me out. It's exhausting. Having all these parents crying at me because they don't know what to do with their children, and it's there's CAMS, there's the Sure Start still looking around the country. In Scotland there's all the other interventions that they have, all the other places they have that they can go to help, and they go to these places but they don't get the help that they need. That support isn't there, and these are the parents that start turning to other things. The parents are so
what we need.
vulnerable.
I've been working with the NHS, Joe Whaley, and because I did a talk to the NHS Advisory Committee and did a presentation about MMS. And we've agreed that what needs to be done and what is being done is a leaflet that will detail all the treatments and what not to use, and what doctors should be looking out for if children are brought into hospitals or into their practices, if there's more than 3 signs for possible MMS abuse, to investigate that, to look at that. I think that a leaflet like that should be handed out with each diagnosis. Maybe even before diagnosis, because parents are told, my child might have autism. Quickly, start purging them of heavy metals, start doing this, start doing that. And parents do believe that they should be doing something. They've had autism thrown at them. They didn't know their children were autistic, a lot of them, and they believe, oh my God, that wasn't there before, even though it was. They're scared.
And they want to feel like they're doing something, and they want to feel like
they do believe that they want to do something. They want to take the control back.
And just to explain, I mean, that's what we hear, every day in our home.
I know.
We take 80,000 inquiries a year there.
Yeah.
But also, our branch volunteers. So our branches are in contact with about 20,000 families across the country, and they are similarly, they are volunteers. So they're autistic adults or family members of autistic people, and similarly are taking those kind of calls. So the desperation that people feel, we completely,
I know.
We're all.
I mean, even on your website, you were referring people to myself and Fiona at one point for quite a few years.
Well, we were doing that, I thought, because that's what you wanted us to do, wasn't it?
In a way, but you could do what I do.
We do in terms of providing early advice to parents about autism.
No, I mean, you could be reporting parents. You could have you've got the money and the manpower to do what I do 1,000-fold.
I suppose the question. I suppose the reason we're here is to try and work out what is the most effective thing that we can bring to the table. Because if it is putting pressure, I guess the question I really want to come back to was, if the MHRA did what the HPRA have done,
then it could be.
What would be the gap? And how much difference? I guess it
would make a big difference.
Okay.
It would make a massive difference if they could do what they are doing. Yeah, it would help a lot.
So we are really happy to write the MHRA, to ask for a meeting, to try and understand what is going on, and say what we would like to do is get them to acting in the same way the HPRA do.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to us. I guess what we want to make sure is, Rich has got this list here. If we split our effort between all these 6 things, we're probably not going to have as much impact as if we say the biggest thing that would make a difference is X. And from talking to Fiona, it sounded like the biggest thing that would make a difference is getting rid of this confusion between the FSA and the MHRA, and getting the MHRA to act like the HPRA.
That's already in the report anyway, isn't it? That there is confusion.
In the Westminster Commission report?
Yeah.
I think so.
It is in there,
I think it sets out that there's
there's a discrepancy, that needs to be sorted out. It is, isn't it? But I know that the report is also leaning towards a legislation on new guidelines, and I just want to know, are you going to support them?
Potentially. We need to look at the report properly. It's in my
It needs to be sent back by Monday.
Yeah, I know. I've got it. I've read through it. I just need to go back through it again.
You're part of the commission.
You're part of it.
I know.
One of the things that we shouldn't forget is that NICE spend a lot of time looking at these issues in some detail, and have reported both on children and on adults. And I think that if people did follow NICE guidance, which they should, then these things wouldn't happen. So I think that they can be pointed back at health authorities, at NICE guidance, where the child is referred for a diagnosis of autism. And it's all there. You read it.
And that's that's what we do when we give information, and that's what we do through our early bird courses and all those things. Is trying to make sure that people have that understanding before they get into this.
So it is about making use of something which is already there and remind people that it's there, because
scaling up.
And say, look, just follow NICE guidance on this, and you won't go far wrong. Both in terms of early parenting programs and on the protocols around diagnosis and treatment.
Okay, well, we will definitely write to MHRA, within the
If you request a meeting, can I be invited, please?
Yeah, we'll ask them.
Thank you.
And there's certainly, I guess looking at the areas of action, one of the things that we kind of haven't necessarily talked about is that, I think you're sort of saying, in terms of social services maybe not being as aware of these kind of issues as they should be, and then kind of post-diagnosis, whether through the diagnostic process there's enough information and support being given to parents so that they don't feel desperate, they don't feel like they need to come and ask you on Twitter what help they need, that they're actually getting that right help post-diagnosis, so they don't then get fall prey to charlatans.
Would you consider some sort of campaign? I did ask this a few years ago when I was here with Carol, and she said no, but do you know how much difference it would make to have your posters up at bus stops and etc. saying that there is no cure for autism? So do not use these.
When you put out your message that there is no cure for autism, sometimes it can be a little bit woolly.
I know it.
It's kind of. I should have brought the tweet actually. It's kind of obviously. I know Josh does his social media, and this is obviously no reflection on him. But I think it's not just that. It's like it just comes across as the NAS needs money to run. I know that, right? It's very, very obvious to me that the NAS kind of needs the negative narrative a little bit in order to generate funds for itself. If there was a positive message about autism, there's probably less drama about it, so to speak, so there would be less interest in it.
But I guess that's how you split what the negative and positive is.
Well, hold on 1 minute, I'll put you on loudspeaker. Yeah, I will. All right, Fiona, go on and talk.
Hi, everybody. I just filling in. I'm just back from court, and we won. This bleacher, Patrick Merlin, who was convicted, appealed his case, and he lost his appeal. He's the first person to be convicted in the whole of Europe and the second in the world. So I'm literally ecstatic right now. Why doesn't England do the same? You know, England needs to do this. They need to prosecute those that are abusing autistic children. I'm proud of my country, and Emma needs support. Please, please push the MHRA to enforce the laws that they have to stop this crime and bring in legislation. Exhausted, but overjoyed.
You've done beautifully, darling. I'll give you a call when I'm out of here, all right?
Yeah, okay. Let me know how it goes, please.
Will do. Of course I will.
Bye.
Bless her. You know, that came about because she was offered MMS by Malahan to cure her children. She contacted the police, so she's done this. I'm so proud of her.
Fantastic. It's really fantastic. So, I don't know if this helps just to explain a bit about how we decide what we campaign on. So what we do is every year we put out a survey, which last year over 1,000 autistic people responded to. More families responded to it than autistic people. What we do is we analyse those separately so that we give equal weight to different people's perspectives. We would absolutely love it if more than 1,000 people responded to that. You know, we do put it out on our Twitter feeds, we put it out on our Facebook. So Facebook, we've got 440,000 likes, I think. So we've got about 130 on Twitter. We then put it out through email, we put it out on our website. So it's absolutely open for people to respond to. And we then ask people what the sort of most important issues are for them to campaign on. We also ask people what the most important services are that we run, kind of what the most important activities are that we do. So the one that came up as the most important activity last year was promoting public understanding of autism. So that's why we do run our TMI campaign. The way we then decide what the message is for the TMI campaign is we then do separate surveys to say what is it that autistic people and their families want the public to know about autism. And the 5 things that people told us that the public needed to know were that autistic people need more time to process information, that autistic people can have sensory overload, that you can end up being anxious because of those things, that unexpected changes are very difficult, and that you can end up having a meltdown or a shutdown because of all those things. And it was on the basis of those 5 things that we developed TMI. So it wasn't that we sort of went, here's a clinical definition of autism and this is what we're going to tell people about autism. It was
a damn good campaign.
Good, I'm glad it's continuing.
That's the thing, and we were talking about this before, that, you know, what the NAS does well, it does really, really well.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, one of my earliest blogs was about the party video that you guys made, which was amazing, absolutely amazing. I thought it was brilliant. But we feel that when the NAS doesn't do things particularly well, it does them terribly. And, you know, the figure that you said there about the 1,000 autistic people, someone, Josh probably had tweeted that the other day, and it's like, that's 0.14% of the autistic population. So something about the NAS, something about your message isn't connecting with us. There is a divide between the NAS and autistic people. There is the autistic community.
We see you more standing for the autism community. That's the thing, which is the autism parents. You know, the ones that take on their child's identity.
We see as being autistic and autism as 2 different things culturally in this country. Autism represents families, parents. Autistic is us. And there is a big gap between those 2 things, and I think
obviously there's an overlap as well.
Yeah, there are overlaps. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, I am myself. You know, there is an overlap, but generally there is a big gap between the autistic community and
I think there are many
different
perspectives.
There are, but I think the problem,
maybe the most extreme difference.
It is the most extreme difference, and that's the thing, and that's kind of where I was talking to just before Emma sort of kind of left the room, that sometimes when you talk about that autism can't be cured, sometimes it can come across as a little woolly. There's no definite statement. Autism cannot be cured. Stop thinking like this. That's a definite statement, but you guys don't come across like that. And
the ABA,
which brings
ABA thing. What's your
which,
stance on ABA? What is the National Autistic
So we are not
stance?
A pure ABA provider. We've never pretended that we that's what we do. We absolutely think autism is lifelong. We do not ever want to stop anybody being autistic. That's not our position. What we do say is that in our schools is we look at individuals, and when we look at what possible tools are there to help that individual, A, be safe, because that's really, really important, and B, for them to fulfill, their goals and aspirations. And we will then use a range of different approaches. But we always do that, we always talk to the person concerned, the child, the student concerned, whatever age they are, and their parents. And I think one of the things that's really, really important is that all of our schools are good or outstanding according to Ofsted. And one of the things that Ofsted look at is they do a survey of parents. They also do a survey of people using the school to make sure that actually the students are happy with, with their experience there. And I have to say, one of the things that makes me most proud when I go into a school school is seeing those survey results up there because they are consistently great. You know, that students are happier. So many students that we talk to in our schools have had horrific experiences in mainstream beforehand. And one thing we try to do is because our schools are smaller, so a lot of our schools are sort of 50 to 100 kids maximum. Yeah. Sometimes that smaller class sizes, so they might some sort of 5 to 10 children in a class. Often with many sort of teaching assistants there as well. What we then try to do is try to make sure those kids have enough access to different subjects, because obviously you don't get as many teachers as you would do in a school of 1,000 kids. But what we try to do is then, I'm just thinking of one kid I know in one of our schools near London. So he's very academically able. He had terrible experiences in mainstream, but we do now, the teaching assistant now goes with him twice a week to the mainstream school so that he can access other courses. But actually it's been very hard, I know in his case, for example, just to get over the fear of what happened to him in mainstream, and to get him to the point where he will go back into that environment for 2 days, because we want him to have the best academic experience he can have, and we want him to achieve his aims. But for us it's about this individual, safety is absolutely essential, but after that, it's what do they want to achieve in their life? And if that's an academic thing, great. If it's independent living schools, great. And talking to them and their
is parents. ABA something that is used in your schools?
We're not an ABA provider, but we do use it. So we look at sort of positive behaviour support, those kind of sort of approaches. But it's within, but it's always for the goal of what does this child want to achieve? It's not how can we stop this child being autistic.
No, that's the concern that's been raised many times to me, is that the NIS support.
And to be honest, we get quite a lot of people from the ABA community saying that we should do more ABA. So we're sort of in the middle on this, to be honest. And I think on a lot of things we are, because when you say, there's sort of, parents and autism parents in inverted commas, so we would never use that language. We would never talk about autism mums or all those kind of things that people say, because we just don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's what they call themselves.
Yeah, and that's in our guidance. I think I guess, it's interesting, just when I was saying about the TMI campaign and those 5 things, so actually, when we did that survey, there was almost complete agreement between autistic people and family members about what is it that the public wants to know about autism. And I literally remember coming for my job here and saying that what I would want to do is try and see where there's agreement, and people going, I'm not sure if you will find anything. And actually, I said, well, if we do, I'll have to leave, because that's my plan. But that actually, what we find more and more is that if there are areas where people really, really agree, and I guess that's where we feel like we can make the most progress, because actually, in campaigning, what you need to do is mobilise lots of people to say the same thing. Otherwise, you don't make progress. But just to explain, so we ask in that survey what is the thing that people most value. We then ask about what are the issues we should campaign on. So the things that came up really big were so education came up really big, diagnosis came up really big, employment. Thank you. I knew it was the third one. Yeah. And so it basically we do try to make sure that we campaign on what autistic people and family members are telling us are the biggest issues. So it's not that we're just sort of sitting in Angel going, I don't know, what should we campaign on next year? But that's where we then put our resources. And also just one more thing I just wanted to quickly say is, I think people sometimes think we've got a bigger team than you might think. So there are some charities that have 70 to 100 people doing policy public affairs campaigns. Sarah's team do policy and public affairs, 4 people. Not all of them full time. So I think when we say, actually we're really ambitious in saying we're going to cover as many issues as we do, because that means we have to cover children's policy, it means we have to cover health, social care policy. There's just a lot that we try to cover with. I know from the outside it looks like, you've got £100 million, but with that money we are trying to run 8 schools. Imagine how much money. That's a huge. We then have over 50 adult social care services. A lot of them are residential services. You're talking big packages of care. Absolutely. So actually, so we have to prioritise. And to be honest, I don't know how we prioritise, except by saying to autistic people and family members, what is it you want us to campaign on? And then I guess also looking at sort of what is coming on the agenda. So for example, if government says they're going to reform the work capability assessment tomorrow, we probably have to be a part of that. Yeah. Like we have to put some of our resources into that, because they'll only do that once every 10 years maximum. It is a constant balancing act. I just want to give you a sense that we have a dilemma on that.
You are, from the outside looking in, you're very much corporate entity. You're a charity, I know that, but you come across as a corporate entity, and that's kind of the image that you give up, the impression that we get from you. Yeah. And I'm sure if you talk to anybody on the street, they would probably say, yes, you're a corporation in terms of what you do and how you act and how big you are, or how big you come across as well. Because you are the National Autistic Society. You represent autism.
I've had to form my own organisation just to keep up with what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and so we understand that it is a huge task in what you do, and thankless in a lot of ways, but thankful in a lot of ways as well. It's important what you do, but this is more important.
Yeah, we need your challenge. We need you.
This is what we were talking about this last night, weren't we? That it's not that you do bad things, but who holds you to account in terms of what you do. And it's, yes, you can put out a survey, and yes, you can have 1,000 people respond, but there isn't this. There isn't a conversation. It's questions, answers. There's no back and forth and back and forth. And I think this is so important. Having a conversation like this, filmed, recorded, put out so that people can access it and understand what's happening. And
I wanted to show you, I've got 3 emails, one from Simon Baron-Cohen, one from Steve Silverman, and one from Damien Milton, all supporting legislation that they've given me to give you. Shall I forward them to you?
Yeah, you can forward them to us.
Yeah,
do that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Can I just go back to the campaign issue?
Yes.
And I absolutely understand why the NES has the priorities, and to work for the NES, I understand the budgeting, and etc. Given that you can't give an undertaking to have a specific campaign about this, and I understand the reason for that. Given that there is this commission report on the horizon, which we're told will probably be the end of March.
I think it's supposed to be launching more than Wednesday.
If there can be a pretty robust statement of intent in that report about these matters, such as zero tolerance of any kind of abuse, etc., would the NES be able to get behind that?
If it's zero tolerance of abuse, of course.
And probably more specifically, guidance as to some of these agencies as to what they can be doing. I can't. None of us know what's going to be in.
I think there's definitely something around the MHRA, though. I mean, I think I was I'm really taken by the fact that
that's one of the things that's in there. But it's what I wouldn't want to do is get too sidetracked on this issue of just the medicines, because I think it's much broader. Autistic people is much broader.
There's chiropractic, there's so many other things that are being targeted.
And there's some of the mainstream stuff being very good when you look at the evidence for it and the cost versus the the benefits. So I think that, and some of that can be pretty harmful too. So I think we need to keep this concept of harm in the middle of what we're looking at.
Psychological and physical,
across the board. And so I'm just putting the question, because so that it's hopefully helpful in the context of the discussion. If we do get to the point with the Commission of having a very robust document that sort of really lays it on the line and is very clear that this is happening, that it shouldn't happen, and that these public authorities must do much more to stop it, then the NES would be right behind.
That's fine. Literally the only issue I think we have is saying legislation without being really sure that legislation is the quickest, most effective route to changing this, and being sure what it would say.
But you wouldn't oppose legislation if that was proposed.
No, I think we'd have to. We wouldn't oppose legislation unless there was a harm to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, of course.
I've waited 4 years. I feel like crying.
No, I
but it's just. But I don't think we can advocate for it until we know where there's a gap.
I think if we can get behind,
I've tried so hard to show the gap.
If we can get behind the report from the Commission, which will incorporate quite a broad set of views, but I think if it comes out in the way that I hope it does, is pretty clear about these things. And if we can get the NES and everybody else behind that, really publicise that, make sure people are aware of that. It's to stop people being isolated and sort of fighting their own corner. If this is part of a much bigger campaign, not necessarily led by the NES, but through the work of the Commission.
So do you think we should wait until after the Commission report to talk to the MHRA?
No, please don't.
No,
I just wanted to ask
I think strike one of the... I don't think it would be either or. I think
it might be that by the time we get a meeting with them, the report will be out.
I support what you're saying anyway. So
I think Fiona's case is a good...
Yeah, that's true. That's a really good point.
It's saying, hey, this has happened in Ireland today.
Why is this not happening?
Absolutely.
I've reported so many websites selling MMS, selling GC math to the MHRA, and they've taken the GC math on, but bounced the chlorine dioxide bleach over to a food standards agency. What sense? It's not a food, it's a bleach. So it's a cop-out, and autistic children are suffering while they're throwing it back and forth.
Yeah.
These people are extremely dangerous, and I've had 3 years of correspondence with that guy from the GC map, and several of his customers threatening me with all sorts of things, none of which came
David
to pass.
I've heard that. I interviewed him.
So, they're very dangerous people.
They are.
And they shouldn't be taken on by individuals. They should be taken on by organisations. Or the police.
Yep. Yeah.
If you're going to deal with these guys, or the statutory agencies. It shouldn't be left to
I had a tablet sent to my house. Note or anything with it, just wrapped up in plain cardboard with my address on it and my name. And it looked brand new. So I've turned it on. Thought, what is this? Does someone send me it as a present? And it had encrypted files. It wanted me to put a password in, so I called the police.
Yeah.
Who came and had a look and put their own password in. So that I didn't know what was going to be on it. And the CID took it. They got involved, and they would not tell me what was on there because it was so distressing. That would incriminate me if I had have gone into it.
Right.
And that's the lengths they're going to stop me. So it's not something that I can do much longer by myself.
And I think that brings us back to what we sort of started with in terms of you have what you've decided is your campaign against these treatments.
Yeah.
And you're up here and Emma's down there, Emma's on the ground, Emma's on her own. Other autistic people around the world who are doing the same, and it shouldn't have to be us that's doing this. It shouldn't. And I think it would be lovely for Emma to get a bit of recognition and support from you guys of what she does and who she faces up against and the level of threat and harm that comes to her. You as the National Autistic Society should be supporting Emma. Even if it's just an arm around her shoulder every now and again, and a public arm around her shoulder, and I think that will
come in and have a hug regularly if you want.
But that will be, because I think the relationship between you two is they're we were getting on and we're chatting and stuff, but it has been not cordial, to a degree, and I think that's because Emma's been frustrated by the lack of what Emma sees as support, and what a lot of us see as a lack of support for what Emma does.
Yeah.
And I think it would be nice if two of you could come together and work together rather than working on the same goals.
We want children not to be hurt.
And you work in very different ways.
I don't see a huge difference, if I'm honest.
No.
I just think it is in the detail. Yeah. And I think that if we can get behind the report, if it is, and it has to, I won't sign up to it unless it is very robust anyway, but I think if it does say the things that I hope it says, I think it could provide a good opportunity for everybody to get on the same page.
Yeah.